Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the video.
What is the creepiest urban legend that you know of? Episode 2. I grew up in Fall River, Massachusetts and was raised with the story of Lizzie Borden. She was accused of brutally murdering her father and stepmother with a hatchet in their family home but was never convicted. We were taught the song Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. We were also told that if you said her name 3 times in a mirror she would appear and kill you with the same hatchet. Oh, and they said that if you drove by her house, you would see her standing in the front window on the top floor. I'd been by the house and visited her grave, but I'd never ever said her name 3 times in a mirror. I'll always have a bit of paranoia about it. I was out fishing in the river near my friend's place. I have fished there nearly every time I go to his place, just to kill time while he is at work, and normally pull up a nice whiting or flathead. Anyway, most times there are about 15 to 20 other people fishing along the same part, maybe 50 to 100 feet apart, and every so often it may be a bit less. For some reason, there was absolutely no one fishing here today. It was a Saturday, beautiful sunny day in summer and the tide was high. The beach nearby was completely packed with people. I was there earlier, but not a single soul was along that river as usual. Now it had been about 3 or 4 months since I had seen my friend, so I thought perhaps there were new laws in place to say no fishing, but there were no signs as far as I could see. So, I fished there anyway, getting the occasional bite from using sea worms as bait. After about an hour or 2 of little bites, I started to get sick of it and was about to pack up when I noticed a small girl was now fishing a little further down. She looked about 4 or 5 years old, and no parents seemed to be around, which is odd because this part of the river was a good mile or so from the nearest estate. I decided to reel in my line and go over to ask her if she was okay. She had her rod cast, a bucket of bait, also using sea worm, and had her tackle box beside her with an empty bucket. Now I am a little older, so in the world we live in now, it's hard to say anything to a younger child without being told off or labeled as a creep. So, I simply asked the first normal question anyone would in this situation. Hi there, are you okay? Where are your parents? There was no reply from her, she just looked on and kept fishing. My name is blank, I just wanted to make sure you are okay, this is a bad place to be on your own, I said to her. Have you caught anything yet? Still no reply. So, I started to walk away and took my gear over to my car when I heard her call out to me. Excuse me. She yells. I turned around and she now had her line reeled in and was staring at me. She had short blonde hair, was wearing a pink dress with a fairy on it. Yes? I ask, confused at what she might say. She then starts to walk over to me, in a dead straight line after putting her rod down, and now I was starting to freak out. Her face was completely expressionless, and it looked like she was going to come over and hit me. I stood still in my tracks, and she finally stopped right in front of me. I look at her and say, "What is it you need?" She replies, "I need a tree fatty." Well, it was about that time that I realized this little girl was in fact 8 stories tall and a gigantic crustacean from the Paleolithic era. God, Loch Ness Monster. You don't need no darn tree fatty. I know the story of the viper. A woman was sitting alone in her apartment on the 4th floor of her building, just wasting time before she went to bed. As she's flipping through channels her phone suddenly rings. Hello, she answers. I am the viper. I am coming for you. 4th floor, number 425. She immediately slams the phone down and starts looking around the apartment, as if he might be there already. It's probably just a prank call, she tells herself. Until her phone rings again. It's the viper. I'm on the 2nd floor. I'll be there shortly. She tells herself it must be a prank, although she feels her heart beating a little faster. Her phone rang again. It's the viper. I'm on the 3rd floor. I'll be there shortly. Her mind is rushing. How did he know exactly what apartment I was in? No one called the viper can be up to any good. Her phone rang again. It's the viper. I'm on the 4th floor. I'll be there shortly. She is in full panic mode now. Who is the viper? What did he want? Why was he coming for her? That's when she hears the banging on her door. Thump. 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 She runs to her room and grabs the .45 her father had bought for her when she moved in by herself. She runs to the door and looks out the peephole. Just outside the door is a shadowy figure. It looks like he's wearing a jumpsuit of some kind, and he was definitely holding some sort of toolbox. Her mind is racing again. What's in the box? What could he possibly want? She unlocks the deadbolt, but kept the chain lock detached, as she slightly cracks the door open. What do you want? She asks frantically. After a second, he calmly replies. I am the viper. I have come to wipe your windows. Slenderman. Slenderman was an experiment done to research how easy it is to create an urban legend. From what I remember, the experiment consisted of somebody on a small forum, doctoring old images to include a tall, thin, faceless man with many arms. This figure went unnoticed by everyone else in the picture. These pictures were then passed out without explanation. Slenderman was a success, made even more popular by the F2P video game focused around Slenderman. Edit, upon further inspection, it appears I may have some incorrect information on the origin of Slenderman. A couple is alone on a chilly winter night. They're snuggling together for warmth and things are progressing towards full-on boning, but in a classy way. The man, recognizing where this is going, excuses himself to the restroom to wash up. After about 5 minutes, there's a knock at the door. Knock knock, who is it? The man asked. It's me, replies the woman, I need to freshen up. So, the man quickly helicopters his dick in order to dry it off, but in a classy way, and quickly puts his pants back on. They exchange a brief kiss as they pass. Don't take too long, he says. He returns to the den in order to prepare for romance. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any candles or incense to help the mood, so he just sets his bowl of potpourri on fire. 2 birds with 1 stone, he thinks to himself. He also decides to put on Bad Touch by the Bloodhound Gang, the classiest of romance songs. He puts it in an infinite loop because he expects the session to take at least 2.5 run-throughs of the song. He's really getting horny now. After a short while she returns, ready to go. They begin to make out, their tongues wrestling like 2 slimy slugs brutally engaged in an Indian deathmatch, but in a classy way. They remove each other's clothes faster than a man with diarrhea runs to the bathroom, which honestly isn't that fast because he'd likely wet his pants if he unclenched his buttocks in order to sprint, making this a fairly awful analogy. Just as they are about to get down to business, the man realizes he left his condoms in the bathroom. Be right back, babe, he says, I forgot Mr. Twiddle's raincoat. She gives him a perplexed look. Where are they? She asks. In the bathroom, he replies. Immediately a look of horror shot across her face. Oh, that? You don't need one of those, she says nervously. She does her best to hide her anxiety, but he knows something is wrong. Come on, let's just go right now. I'm so ready for Mr. Twiddle's spelunking adventure. Let's do this, she exclaimed, sounding completely unconvincing. At this point he knew something was up. Don't worry, I'll be right back. As he got up and turned to head to the bathroom, she grabbed him. Please no, don't go in there. We can do anything you want, baby, even nasal. Her pleas were ignored. When he stepped into the bathroom, he couldn't believe his eyes. There it was, a massive brown turd, floating in the toilet. Perhaps floating is too strong of a word, it was so massive that it sat on the bottom of the toilet and peeked at its devilish brown head above the water, almost as if it were just waiting to be discovered. But I didn't take a shit, he said to himself. It was then that he realized there must have been another man in the house. It was the only plausible explanation. My mom used to tell me this story when I was just a kid. I don't remember the exact details, but I'll try. Not sure if this counts as an urban legend, but it always made me go to bed early. One day a pregnant mother went out into the countryside, not far from where we used to live. The mother came across a donkey, or a goat, I don't remember, and taunted it. She accidentally went behind the donkey, and it kicked her right in the stomach. Nearby witnesses noticed and called for help. As she was being driven to a hospital, her water broke, which was a surprise to her since her baby wasn't due for another couple of months. When the baby was finally born, the nurses/doctors couldn't bear to look at it. The baby had a strange appearance. It had large teeth, long hair on its stomach, and had feet shaped like hooves. Nobody knows what happened next, but people say she kept the baby in her cellar and let her grow until she was older. If you're awake at night, you can hear the mother letting her daughter roam outside. How would you know this? Because you would hear the clopping noise her hooves would make. This is by far the scariest creepypasta I know of. I was driving a shortcut from 29 Palms, California to Albuquerque, New Mexico. 29 Palms is located in the desolate high desert east of LA. The shortcut was all two-lane road through total nothingness, except for passing through Amboy, California. Amboy is a nearly abandoned town nearly as far below sea level as Death Valley, with a dormant volcano and lava field on one side and a salt flat on the other. It was also, at the time, a hotspot for satanic group activity. So, I was driving by myself in the afternoon. I stopped in Amboy and snapped a picture of the city sign, just to prove I was there to friends who dared me to take that route to I-40. I got back in my car and proceeded to drive up into the mountain range between Amboy and I-40. Once I reached the top, I drive north through a canyon with tall grass on both sides of the road. Up ahead, I see some stuff in the middle of the road. As I approach, I slow down to see a red Pontiac Fiero stop sideways across both lanes, a suitcase open with clothes scattered everywhere, and two bodies lying face down in the road, a man and a woman. I stop 100 feet or so away, and the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. Being a Marine, I reach under the seat and pull out a 9mm pistol and chamber around. Something seemed very wrong. It looked too perfect, as if it were staged. An ambush? Was I being paranoid? Something was simply wrong. Getting out of the car seemed unthinkable. It was a horror movie. As I scanned the road, I saw a line I could drive. Pass the guy in the road on his left, swerve to the right side of the woman, behind the Fiero, and I'd be on the other side. I dropped it into first gear, punched it, and drove the line I planned. I passed the back of the Fiero without hitting it or either of the bodies in the road. I continued forward a couple 100 feet and slowed down so I could breathe and let my heart slow down. As I looked up into the rearview mirror, I saw that the two bodies had gotten up to their knees and 20 or so people emerged from the tall grass on either side of the road by the car and bodies. At that moment, my right foot smashed the gas pedal to the floor and did not let up until I had to slow down for the I-40 East on-ramp. I will never know what would have happened to me had I got out of the car to check on the bodies or stopped my car closer to them. Somehow I do not think it would have been good. Sometimes real life can be scarier than a movie.
Okay, so I'm having this party, right? I've got all my boys here. We had a good time, having a few jugs of wine, telling scary stories. It was a dark night. It was lots of fun. So, we're waiting for this one guy to show up, so to pass the time, my boy Felix tells us scary stories about the time his friend saw a werewolf near the woods at the edge of the city. Freaked us. Then my boy Clemens comes back and tells us that the guy we were waiting for, Dekins, has been killed. We all fell silent. According to Clemens, he had been walking near the amphitheater, trying to find my place, when he saw some crazy gladiator waving his massive sword. The gladiator was yelling crazy like, "I'm not afraid of you, lion. A lion killed my friend, but you don't scare me." Dekins was like, "What? I'm not a lion, you're crazy, man." Apparently that's when the gladiator struck Dekins and killed him. It was really quite awful. Everyone just fell silent again. But I understood the truth. The gladiator was not alive, but dead. He was a famous gladiator who was killed by a lion. He was not living, but he was a ghost. All my friends thanked me and walked home. It was a fun night. There is an old urban legend where I live that I've heard all my life. Down an old county road that used to be the main road between my town and the next town up, there used to be the old railway that ran along it. There was a little old house with just a man and his daughter that lived there. One day the daughter was out playing and got hit by the train and was killed instantly. The dad thought for sure she could have lived it and would walk up and down the road asking people driving by if they had seen his kid. Finally, he had lost it, and in the middle of the night, while he was in his house, he set it on fire and burnt to death in it. Now legend has it that if you go out on this road and sit in his old driveway, you can still see the chimney to his house and the little girl's rope swing, and turn your car off and wait. Eventually you will see a green light coming through the woods. At this point, you can still start your car. But once you see the man's face, your car won't do a thing. He will come up to your window and ask if you've seen a little girl. You tell him no, and then he'll ask if you're having car problems. You say yes, and you pop the hood, and he will walk to the front of the car for a bit. He'll shut the hood, tell you to have a good night, and that if you see anything, come and tell him. He will walk off and you can leave then, but if you wait till the light is gone you can look at the swing and it will look like someone is sitting there and it will be slowly moving. Many, many years ago, on a Saturday evening, a boy named Manuel left home to go to a dance held in La Feria. Halfway there, he noticed an incredibly beautiful girl wearing a pink dress. Even though he did not know the girl, he asked her if she was in need of a favor. The girl replied, "Yes, I am in need of a ride to a dance." Gladly, Manuel offered her a ride, and she gratefully accepted. Her name was Maria, but she was not known by many people, because she had been away for 10 years. When they arrived at the dance, many discovered that the girl had problems with the new styles of dance, but was the best polka dancer they had ever seen. After midnight, couples started to leave the dance. As the couple exited, Manuel put his coat over Maria's shoulders. On the way home, Maria had asked to be left at the exact spot in which she was picked up. Manuel wanted to escort her to her house, but she insisted that she be alone. She offered his coat back, but was told to keep it until the next morning, when he would visit her. The next morning, Manuel arrived at the same spot where he had left Maria, and found a little white house about a quarter-mile away. As he drove up, a lady opened the door. Manuel asked if he could see Maria, but the lady froze. "Maria? Maria has been dead for 10 years. But miss, this is not possible. I took her to the dance last night. We had such a good time and she looked so beautiful polka dancing in her pink dress. I even lent her my coat." The lady started to cry. "My daughter was the best polka and corrido dancer, and she was buried in a very pretty pink dress. I'm telling you that she died in an accident 10 years ago. Come with me. I know what will change your mind." The two of them walked silently to a cemetery. It was true. There before them was a stone with the inscription, "Maria Lozano, 1920 to 1940, R.I.P." And upon the grave, Manuel's coat. That whole evening, Manuel had been dancing with a ghost. The ghostly story of the face is of a man who once owned the property where the UTMB Ewing building is located. UTMB offered to buy the property from this man. He refused, and also told his family never to sell the property or he would come back and haunt them. After his death, his daughter sold the property to UTMB. UTMB built the Ewing Hall building on the dockside of the university. The old owner's face, aka, the face, appeared on the dockside of the Ewing Hall building. According to legend, the face first appeared on the 4th floor panel of the building. The 4th floor panel of the building was then sandblasted and painted over. The face then appeared on the 3rd floor panel just below it. This panel was subsequently sandblasted, causing the face to move to the 2nd floor panel of the building to which it resides to this day. UTMB eventually gave up trying to remove the face and is now a permanent addition to Ewing Hall. People have died trying to see this. It's not worth your life, don't risk it. It is state property, and access is restricted, you can be arrested. I will tell you the story of the doll in the attic. There is a small town in rural Minnesota. If you know where to look, you will find a house with an attic window. The doll will be staring down at you. Most people don't see it these days since the highways were rerouted a few years ago to go around the town instead of through it. But the doll's still there, just like it has been for decades. Nobody knows why it's there, unmoving. Some say that a little girl was locked in the attic for days until she died of thirst, and the doll is a memorial. Some say that a little girl disappeared from the park across the street, and the doll stands in the window to watch over the children who play there to this day. Some say there was a little boy in the house who was mentally disabled or disturbed, and when the people of the town made his life miserable, he hanged himself in the attic window for all to see, and the doll is a reminder to the townsfolk. There is a man who lives in the house, but he will not speak about the doll. They say he's left a time capsule in the town with the secret of the doll, but it won't be opened for another 200 years, long after he and you and I have turned to dust. On the day the capsule is opened, I think, the doll will still be standing in the window. Most people in San Francisco have heard of the Golden Gate Park ghost police officer. People claim to have been driving through a GG park at night when all of a sudden they would be pulled over and cited. When they would go and pay the ticket, they would be told that no such police officer works for SFPD. Apparently, if you have the ghost police officer follow you all the way until you exit GG Park, the police car mysteriously disappears at the border of the park. La Llorona almost got my uncle when he was a kid. One night when he was playing in the river behind the ranch, it was late evening. As it was getting dark, he heard my grandma, his mom, yell for him to come home. He gets dressed and starts walking, but when he gets to the little T section that splits towards the ranches and the main road to town, he sees his mom to the left telling him to go with her. She needs him. So he starts walking, and he says that little by little he start noticing things about her, how her hair is flowing, even though there's no wind, how her dress is white, almost blazingly white, and he starts sweating and panting. He sees the bottom of the dress, and doesn't see legs or even the shape of legs moving underneath. Just then his mom yells for him to come home. He just turns around and runs back home. My grandma said he was completely distraught. He was up all night crying and wouldn't let go of her. The Rake, from Creepypasta. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip to Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly his knee almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for a half second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man, or a large hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed, and then crawled quickly in a flailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5, it just seemed like a while, just looking at my husband. The creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway, leading to the kids' rooms. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter Clara. The creature ran down the stairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very severely injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the Rake." My husband drove his car into a lake that night, while rushing our daughter to the hospital. They did not survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now refer to as the rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages, and never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night, for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the 2nd week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. This still took almost an hour every day. On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head made me terribly upset. I have not seen the rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know and fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me. This game was used as a ritual to summon the Midnight Man to punish rule breakers in pagan religions long ago. Warning, play this game at your own risk of torture and death. You'll need the following supplies to play: paper, a pencil, needle, candle, a box of matches, a door, and salt. Turn off all the lights. Light a candle. Write your name on the paper, first, middle, and last. Prick your finger with the needle and add a drop of blood on the paper. Allow it to soak and place the paper with your name on the floor in front of the door. Knock on the door 22 times with the ticking of the clock. The 22nd knock must occur at 12 a.m. Open your door, blow out the candle, and close it. You have now summoned the Midnight Man. Immediately light your candle. This is when the game begins. Your goal is to avoid the Midnight Man at all costs. You may move through the house to avoid him. You can tell if he is near. Your candle will go out, it will get chilly, you'll hear a low whisper, and he will appear in front of you. You must light the candle within 10 seconds. If not, throw down a circle of salt around yourself and stay inside the circle from 12:01 a.m. to 3:33 a.m. If you are still alive at 3:33 a.m., you've won. If not, you'll be tortured, sometimes to death, until 3:33 a.m. Come back and let us know if you've won the game. A mother and her son walk into a store to get some shopping done. While checking out, the boy sees a clown figure standing at the height of his mother holding out a distinctive peace sign with one hand, grinning from one ear to the other. At the sight of this, the boy begs his mother to buy the amusing toy for him. Hesitant, the mother asks the clown to a clerk. The clerk says it's cheap and for sale, but it's a used toy. On hearing about the low price, the mother agrees to purchase the toy for her son. After a couple of days of laughter and amusement, the boy set the clown in the corner of his room. Weeks passed and eventually, the clown was forgotten like most toys are. One night, the mother comes home to find that her son is missing. She looks all over the house and calls his friends, but all to no avail. The mother ends up in her son's room, crying at the foot of his bed, when she looks to the corner of the room. Through her tears, she sees the clown standing there, where it was forgotten, but now holding 3 fingers up with an even wider grin to show.
Around my local town, there is a small cemetery on a county road. The story goes that a man killed his 2 children and his wife, before killing himself, and they're all buried in this little cemetery. Well, turns out I live rather close to said cemetery. One Halloween night, a bunch of my friends and I went out to the location at around midnight. We'd been reading up on the place online and gotten a good spook out of the stories. The online stories claimed that if you drove to the place at night, shut off your lights and went outside, the temperature would drop dramatically, and the corn would sway regardless of wind speed. The night we went out was an extremely nice, warm, calm night, especially for an October night in the Midwest. We get to the place, and everyone hops out of the car almost immediately. We're walking around, scoffing at the thought of something actually being haunted. I had never been one to believe ghost gobbledygook before. Nothing's happening. Friends start getting bored. They start shouting random stuff, they read the headstones and start shouting the names, taunting the names to come forth. At this point I start getting a weird feeling. I know how disrespectful they're being, so I tell them to cut it out, but they don't. Eventually one of them remembers that we are to turn off all the lights, and my car's headlights are still on. Everyone urges me to go shut them off, and I oblige. As soon as I do I regret it. Instantly it drops 10, maybe 15 degrees. Where I was once almost sweating in the humidity, I'm now shivering in the cold, my sweat damp and making the chill worse. I start looking for a sweater when I hear my friends start whispering/moving frantically away from the gravestones. I pull the hoodie over my head and look out into the cornfield, behind the stones. Just like the stories, the corn is swaying, hard. There's no wind. At all. Just swaying in the October moonlight. We all stood there, a little mesmerized by the sight. All 5 of us. After a while, my trance breaks because I think I see something out of the corner of my left eye. I glance over to the ditch and see a black shape start to form. I grew up on a farm, so I know a raccoon or a possum when I see one, even a coyote. But those critters don't stand on their hind legs. And they don't walk on their hind legs. And they don't stand up to my height. I'm guessing here, it was in a ditch, and I was on the road. My GF of the time just says, "Oh shit," and runs to the car, followed by everyone else. She jumps into the front passenger seat, as we're all scrambling into seats and I'm getting in the driver's seat. As she's getting in I hear a loud thud and look around to see her basically collapse into the car. She has a small gash that's already bleeding on her forehead and doesn't know what's going on really. I reach across her lap and pull her door shut and tear off down the gravel road in my old Grand AM. As we're pulling away we all hear a loud shrieking/ripping sound of something being dragged or torn from the car. I'm too preoccupied with driving, but my friends in the back keep saying, "There's something with red eyes following in the ditch, there's something with red eyes." Repeatedly. We get back to my friend's house in town and almost everyone decides it's just time to go home. Someone hops out of my car to look at the side and notices the side paneling stuff, like the trim, was ripped off completely. As in, not there anymore. It's about 2 a.m. by the time I get home and boot up my laptop. I get on IM to talk to some friends still. My then girlfriend was on, and I started talking to her. Just bullshitting around, before we talked about what happened that night. When I asked her what happened in the car, she just shook her head and said she must have tripped or been clumsy. When I asked if she was alright on IM, she took a while to respond before saying she was scared. When she was getting into the car, she felt something grab her by her hair and slam her head into the doorframe. I'm starting to get shivers talking about it with her, so I ask her what else happened. You know how on IM everyone uses abbreviations and sloppy grammar? And how does it tell you that someone is writing a response? Well, she was no different. Used sloppy IM style writing until now. The chat box said she was writing a message for a good 5 minutes, and then it disappeared. And then it came back up and within seconds a lengthy paragraph with the most impeccable spelling, grammar, and just flat-out style of speaking I've ever read. It seemed like it was someone's really old writing. The paragraph explained what was going on, and apparently my friend was, for lack of a better word, possessed. I told her to cut it out, that I wasn't amused. The reply was just you shouldn't be. You shouldn't let her fall asleep tonight. As suddenly as the perfect writing came, it disappeared, and my GF was back and responding to my initial question without even knowing that almost a full hour had lapsed between then and now. During that time, I was talking to another girl that had been with us. When my GF came to, the other friend went out. But, the wording wasn't as malicious as my GFS was. It was actually rather nice, comforting, and genuine. I could feel warmth and safety ooze from the letters as if someone were there warming me with a heat lamp. I asked who the person was. The reply scared me a little. It was the name of the person on the headstone. He let me know he was there to help, and to get some rest. And then my friend was back. I must repeat, as this is when I really started believing something was wrong. Her grammar and spelling was impeccable. It was never this good. Even if she had tried, I don't think she was smart enough to write like this. Anywho, the next day I get to school and stand around with my GF before the first bell. She looks worried, and mouths that she needs to talk to me. I follow her into a hallway, and she pulls up her shirt and shows me her back. 6 scratch marks down the length of her back, in 2 groups of 3. Like a punch to the gut when you see that. There's a lot more to this story, but I swore, this is going to sound funny, to the ghost/demon/angel? Something, that I wouldn't divulge any information. Long story short, the good guy that told me to go to sleep let me know a few nights later, after sleepless nights and just freaking out, that I should go and pray by the gravesite during the day, and to never return at night. I did so the very next morning. When I did, it literally felt like a huge weight of relief was lifted off of me. The cornfields seemed to sigh with relief. Like seriously, it sounded like everything around me just became unmuffled. I don't know how to explain it. We were never bothered again afterwards. A few years later, I asked my then GF, ex at the time, if she was bullshitting me the whole time. She grew silent and looked away before looking me in the eyes and telling me that she has nightmares every night about it. Seeing blood-red eyes staring at her through the window of her house. She started shaking violently before I told her I was sorry I had brought it up. She smiled grimly before saying, I know. I haven't talked about it much with anyone, my sister and my brother. The only 2 to have ever believed me. My brother won't listen to me talk about it anymore, freaks him out too much. My sister is curious, but terrified. I still don't know what to think. Let me tell you about the story of OM. In 2004, Tim and Andy were driving on a highway in the middle of nowhere, New Hampshire at 2 a.m. on their way back from getting Dunkin' Donuts. For most of the drivers, they had the highway to themselves, but eventually a car came into view ahead of them. It was a red compact car with all the markings scraped off. The only identifying feature was its license plate that had a black O and a green M. Tim and Andy were a bit disturbed by this car and slowed down to let the car go on ahead, but when they slowed down, OM let off the gas too, and when Tim stepped on the gas, so did OM. While going into a bend, Tim stopped the car and just waited, hoping that OM would just go on and leave him and Andy alone with their donuts. After waiting somewhere for 10 to 30 minutes, our brave stoners continued around the corner and there was OM. The exact same distance ahead as they last saw him. Eventually, the highway split in 2, the stoners took the route into civilization while OM went further into who gives a NH. To this day, Tim says that was the only time he was stalked from the front. That was the story Tim's brother Steve told me my freshman year of high school, 06-07. Steve wasn't exactly sure of the veracity of the story but was convinced that Tim honestly believed it happened. Fast forward to around 08-09, after school I was listening to a local news radio station, Southern California, and they briefly mentioned that the previous night there was a murder in Riverside County, about 1 county east of me, and the only witness reported seeing a red car leaving the scene with a license plate that had a black O and a green M. I only heard them mention this story once and I was convinced I was just hearing things. The next day I ran into Steve, and I told him what I heard, and he said he heard the same thing. That's when we knew that 1, we weren't crazy, and 2, epilogue, about 3 months ago my friend Blake was driving through Canyon after dropping his girlfriend off at home, around 2 a.m. Along the way a car pulled out of a donut shop in front of him. It was a red car with a license plate that had a black O, and a green M. Blake was familiar with OM, and after seeing the license plate slowed down and stayed as far behind OM as OM let him. Eventually OM turned around and retreated back towards the donut shop. We're not exactly sure what OM is, but my best guess is that he's a serial killer that jumps from state to state in order to confuse the police. And he's still out there. This family had just purchased a small puppy. They had only had it for a week or so and decided to take it to the beach with them. When they arrived, they found out that they could not take the puppy onto the public beach because of a city ordinance. Instead of traveling back home to leave the puppy or leaving it in a hot car, they left it on its leash, tied to the car. After a few hours, they came back to the car to discover that someone had stolen their puppy. The leash and collar were still there, tied to the car. They searched all around the parking lot for the puppy. No luck. They did, however, find another scruffy-looking dog wandering the lot with no collar. Instead of leaving with no pet, they decided to give the mutt a home. They brought it home and kept it in the house with them for a week. They then decided to take the dog to the vet to get his shots, etc. Upon examining the dog, the vet made two discoveries. Their new pet was not a dog, but a large dock rat. Their puppy was not missing but had been eaten by the rat. So, there's this hunter in the woods, right? The sun's beginning to set and he needs to get to his truck before dark. After a few minutes of walking, he realizes that he's lost. Rather than trying to navigate the forest in the dark, he finds an old cottage and decides he'll try his luck there. He knocks on the old, rotted door and asks if anyone's there. No answer. Still cautious, he slowly pushes the door open and calls out again. No answer. He figures the place had been abandoned for a long time, evident by the layers of dust on everything. So, he looks around and finds a bedroom. As he walks in, he sees that the walls are lined with portraits. Nothing but people on a black background. They all seem to stare at him, their eyes following him. As uncomfortable as he was, he tried to ignore the portraits and go to sleep on the old bed. But his thoughts continue to wander towards the portraits. He looks at them again. Their expressions seem to change. They seemed angry. As if they disapproved of their intruder. The hunter ignored it as best as he could, eventually managing to fall asleep. The next morning the hunter awakened to find that there were no portraits. Only windows. A couple was driving down the road and were listening to music. All of a sudden their music got interrupted by a scratching sound, and then a man's voice. This is a public announcement. He spoke. A psychotic killer has escaped from the Hartsfield Asylum for the mentally ill. He is considered extremely dangerous. If he is seen, contact 911 immediately. Stay safe, folks. Be sure to lock your doors and your windows. Then the radio scratched back to their music. I don't feel too good now, said the woman. Oh, we'll be fine, don't worry, we'll make it home just fine. He was cut off by a sputtering in the car's engine, followed by it stopping. Damn it! The man said, out of gas. Now the woman was clearly scared. What are we gonna do? She exclaimed. Listen, we'll be fine, said the man. I saw a gas station not too far back. I'll go grab us some gas. Be sure to lock the car. Wait, how will I know, when you get back that is, that you aren't the murderer? She was still on edge. Listen, when I get back I'll knock on the window 3 times, so you know it's me, alright? Alright, the woman said. So, the man got the gas container and headed on his way, while the woman hid in the back of the car with a blanket over her. About an hour passed when she heard the first knock. Knock, alright, she thought, that one, then another, knock, that's 2, and once more, knock, which must be Tom. She was about to uncover herself when she heard another knock, and another, and another. She finally passed out from fear of what was tapping on the car. She was awoken by a police officer the next morning. Miss, are you alright? He asked. I am fine, but where is Tommy? She asked. We'll talk about that later, but we need to get you out of here first. Miss, do yourself a favor, and don't turn around. Human nature being what it is, she turned around. And there hanging above the car was her boyfriend's decapitated body hanging by his arm as his foot tapped against the car roof. A woman kept having these terrible dreams. She'd go to sleep, and halfway through the night she would see a wolf's head at the foot of her bed, floating above her and panting heavily, like Mike Myers in Halloween heavy breathing. She would be stricken with fear, petrified. No matter what she did, she kept having the same dream. This goes on, she's scared to fall asleep because she knows the wolf will be there, waiting. It happens again. She is finally able to get up and run after the wolf in the dream world. All at once, she realizes, she isn't dreaming, she hasn't been dreaming, it has been a man in a wolf mask. He's been breaking in and hovering above her, breathing heavy night after night. My grandma used to tell me horror stories when I was a kid. This one struck me the most. My grandma lives in Vietnam, and one morning she got up early to go to the supermarket. There she met this lady who walked and shopped with her. At the end of their errands, they parted ways and shook hands. My grandma noticed that the lady's hand was really weird and way too soft to be normal, so she asked her what was wrong. The lady simply replied, "It's normal, I've been dead for 20 years, my body has been rotting." True story, that happened to her. A guy's flight home was delayed by a winter storm, so he decided to check in at a hotel and spend the night. By the time he got inside, it was snowing pretty hard, so he didn't want to leave. The man at the counter told him there was only one room available, and that there had been a homicide in it years earlier. The man decided to try his luck for the night. He walked into the room and went straight to sleep. He had no problem sleeping until he heard noises coming from the hall at 2 in the morning. He shrugged it off as nothing and went back to sleep. He woke up again about half an hour later because of the noises. He then decided to walk to the door and look through the peephole to see what was going on. The man saw a young girl dancing to music in the hallway, and he was slightly intrigued. He watched for nearly 10 minutes before he got hungry. He went to the fridge, got food, and came back. When he looked back into the peephole, it was just red. He assumed she knew he was watching him and put construction paper over the hole for privacy. The man went back to bed. When he woke up, he collected his things and headed down to the lobby. He asked the man at the desk about the murder in the room. The clerk said that it was a girl, maybe 15 years old. She liked to dance, most often in the lobby. The creepy thing about it, though, he said, is that when they found her body, the blood vessels in her eyes were all messed up. They were completely red. I remember when I was young and looked up urban legends online because camping. Anyways, I came across one story that has stuck with me since those adolescent days, even though it isn't that scary. I'll try and write it down as best as I can because I can't find it. The story goes that a woman was on a trip to Thailand with her 5-year-old son. After hours of sightseeing and shopping in the bustling city like any other, the kid has to go pee. Desperate to keep shopping, the mother miraculously finds a bathroom in a street market. She is about to take him to the ladies' washroom so she can help him out, but he stops her and goes into the men's washroom all by himself. Proud of how grown up he is getting, she patiently waits outside. After a few minutes, a couple of boys came out, but her son was still inside. Somewhere between the reminiscence of her son's younger days and the constant glances at her watch, she decides to ignore her son's pride and go in to see what's the holdup is. After checking in each stall, she arrives at the last one to find her son on the seat of the toilet, with his throat slit and his genitals shoved in his mouth. A local one, Acid Park, the story is that a distraught man built a memorial for his daughter who crashed her car on her way home after dropping acid. There are all sorts of sculptures made of reflectors, and a little way up the path from there you could see a car crashing into a tree. I went there one night with some friends, and it was very, very creepy. Dead quiet except for the scree-scree sounds of the reflector sculpture wheels turning. Walked to see if the car was there, yep, and it was scary to think someone died in there. Then, got chased by some terribly angry Dobermans who protect the guy's home and property at the end of the lane. This was way before the internet, so there was no real way of knowing what the story really was. It was an artistic venture that became a tribute to urban legends in general. No dead daughter, just an interesting whirligig farm. I'm not sure if the car is still there, but the sculptures are. To preface this story, I live next to an insane asylum and a zoo. The zoo would always play an air raid sound around 9 p.m. to let anyone in the park know that the zoo was closing, and you needed to leave. Anyways, a girl heard a local report on the news of an escaped patient from the insane asylum near her house. Thinking nothing of it, she took her dog for a walk in the area like she did every day. After a long walk she came home and decided to get ready to go to bed. She spent a while in bed reading a book and then finally turned off the lights. In the middle of the night, she awoke to need to go to the bathroom. While in the bathroom she heard a constant drip, drip, drip. Again, she thought nothing of it because she lived in an older home and the taps were often dripping. Before falling asleep she put her hand on the side of her bed for her dog to lick. In the morning, she awoke to take a shower. She walked to the bathroom and again heard the noise of the drip, drip, drip. She opened the shower curtain and saw her dog hanging from the shower head, dripping blood into the drain. Before calling the police, she wondered what or who had licked her hand in the night. My friends and I started having sleepovers the summer before our first semester of college to prepare ourselves for dorm life. And it was my turn to offer my house to have them stay at for a night. Note this is the house I've lived in for 10 years. My friends and I watched random YouTube videos, told stories until it was time to hit the hay. All my friends fit in my room as we had a mattress on the floor and the other friends slept with me on my bed. We turned off the lights and locked the door and everyone dozed off. A couple of hours later, the sun is up, and everyone is waking up. I woke up to notice 3 of my friends, there were around 7 of us, on their phones and they freaked it out. I asked them what's wrong and they said that in the middle of the night the 3 of them needed to go to use my bathroom. In order to reach my bathroom, you need to walk down the dark eerie hallway, which at the end, is my kitchen and a window. They said that before they even got to reach the bathroom, all 3 of them noticed 2 green dots, which resembled eyes, at the end of the hallway in the kitchen. All 3 of my friends slept with their phones in their pockets so they had their phones with them when they went to piss. As a result, all 3 of my friends snapped a picture of the green pair of eyes. After they told me what they saw, they showed me all their pictures. I noticed and told my friends that only 2/3 of their pictures had some sort of green dot showing and how one of the pictures doesn't. They all had the iPhone 4S and the pictures were obviously taken at the same spot. They were terrified even further. Now around this time, 2 more friends are waking up and they were told the same story. These 2 friends also mentioned that something really odd happened yesterday. They said that I stood up in the middle of the night and watched them sleep for a while until they said, "Hey, what's wrong?" and then I went back to bed. I have no recollection of me doing this, and as far as I know, I do not sleepwalk. After hearing this I woke all my friends up and had everyone share their experience. All of a sudden my grandmother walks into the room to greet us good morning. Then she tells us that when she went to check on us in the middle of night, she said that she saw one of my friends laying on the couch the whole night. She points to the friend that she said she saw, and he replied that he spent the whole night in my room. By the way, my grandmother is at the age where she doesn't know how to lie, and she just spits out what she sees. Now my friends think my house and I are haunted. P.S. This was the day after we all saw Insidious. My father told me this story about grandfather who at the time was a young boy living in Mexico. He told me this on a camping trip while in the car and he joked about it, but still it's creepy. Anyways, as a young boy my grandfather walked home at night. Apparently, it was dark out and it was past the time he had to go home. He walked around the sidewalk passing the closing buildings and all the lights. Now this was before Mexico was a shooting country, and so I imagine it must have been silent with him the only one in the street. As he was walking a loud banging came from an alley. My grandfather was interested and went in to check it out. Standing there he tried to find the source. Suddenly he saw a large where it came from. He ran from the alley and came back to his house as fast as possible. What was it? I asked. My father told me that back in the old days people who didn't have enough money usually didn't have enough room to store things in their house. Of course, there was a huge problem from this. Where would store a dead body? So back then it was customary to have boxes to store dead bodies, leaving them behind your house and wait till the next day to ship them to a funeral, or at least something like that, and that was the moment I realized that my grandfather probably left some poor man to die in a storage box. There was this old graveyard behind these baseball fields in my hometown that had what was supposedly a witch's grave in it. The gravestone had pentagrams and other occult stuff on it. We used to go there and drink malt liquor and smoke weed. We went there one winter night when there was probably 3 inches of snow on the ground, and from the center of the grave sprouted a red rose that we had never seen before. I don't think we ever went back. Unfortunately, that whole graveyard was moved a few years ago. I have no idea what happened to the witch's grave after that. So, there's this man out in the woods, alone, cutting some wood for the winters to come. The pile created, he drapes a tarp over it and begins his walk back. During his walk back, he happens across a coffin, leaning against a tree. Thinking nothing of it, he continued walking back to his cabin. On his way there, he began to hear a distinct thump, 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 coming from behind him. He turned around and saw the coffin lying in the center of the path. Feeling a little freaked out now, he began to walk at a slightly faster pace. The noises followed suit. Thump, thump, thump. Hearing the coffin behind him, he lashed out with his woodcutting axe, launching it at the coffin. Upon impact, the axe disintegrated, becoming many small particles of dust. Becoming completely horrified now, he sprints towards the safety of his log cabin, the thumping following suit at his pace. Finally, in the safety of the cabin, the man locked the doors and leaned against it, reveling in the solid paneling and barred windows. He breathed a deep sigh of relief and lay down on his couch. Out of nowhere, he heard a muffled thump, 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 coming from the outside of the door. The door exploded, sending splinters and shards of glass flying everywhere. The man, visibly shaken, scarred, and battered, sprinted up the stairs. Looking around, he realized that he'd trapped himself. He heard the slow, methodical sound of the coffin climbing the stairs. Thump, thump, thump. Looking around, the man saw the safety of his bathroom, equipped with a metal door because of the sale at his nearest hardware store so long ago. If only he could get out of this, he'd go to the hardware store for the rest of his life in appreciation for what it would have saved. Locking himself in, he looked around for anything that might be of use against the supernatural enemy. Thump, thump, thump came to the coffin. At last, it had reached the door. The man panicked as he rifled through the medicine cabinet, searching for something of use. The metal door melted, and the man began launching different articles at the coffin. Toothpaste, toothbrush, Advil, Tylenol, aftershave, a razor, all of these things suffered the same fate as his axe from what seemed like hours ago. He reached to the back of his cabinet and groped around for the last thing there, a can of Buckley's. The coffin approached. Thump, thump, thump. With great heaven, he launched the Buckleys at the coffin. The coffin stopped. Alright, I know it's not technically a horror story, but I just had to share it, smiley face.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.